Welcome back to our journey through the Bible. Have you ever been given instructions that seemed absolutely ridiculous? Instructions that made no logical sense? Today's story is about a military campaign that defied every rule of warfare and shows us that God's ways are not our way, but God's way always works. Our story begins with the Israelites standing on the edge of the Promised Land. For over 400 years, they had been slaves in Egypt. Then God had sent Moses to deliver them, bringing them out through miraculous plagues and the parting of the Red Sea. They had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because they disbelieved. And now, finally, they were ready to enter the land God had promised to Abraham hundreds of years earlier. The land wasn't empty. It was filled with fortified cities and powerful enemies. And standing directly in their path was Jericho. Jericho wasn't just any city. It was one of the oldest and most fortified cities in the region. It was closed up tight from inside. The gates were locked, and no one was going in or out. The people of Jericho had heard about the Israelites and the miracles their God had performed. They had heard how God dried up the Red Sea and defeated mighty kings. They were terrified, but they were also prepared to defend themselves. The walls of Jericho were massive, 25 feet high with thick inner and outer walls. Conquering Jericho seemed impossible. The Israelites had no siege equipment, no battering rams, no experience in attacking cities. They were former slaves and desert wanderers, not soldiers. God had a plan. It was unlike any battle plan anyone had ever heard of. One day, Joshua, who had become the leader of Israel after Moses died, was near Jericho. When he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua, being a military leader, went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" The man replied, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." This wasn't just an angel. This was a divine appearance, possibly a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ himself. Joshua immediately fell on his knees in worship and asked, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army said, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. This is important because it reminds us that the battle wasn't really Joshua's, it was the Lord's. The army fighting for Israel wasn't just the Israelite soldiers. It was the army of heaven itself. Then the Lord gave Joshua his battle plan. God said, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and mighty men of valor." God spoke in the past tense, "I have given," even though the walls were still standing and the battle hadn't been fought yet. In God's eyes, the victory was already accomplished. But here's how they were supposed to achieve it. "You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, everyone straight before him." That was God's battle plan. Walk around it. Once a day for 6 days, and 7 times on the 7th day, and then shout. It seemed downright foolish. The soldiers of Jericho probably laughed at first, until the walls came down. Joshua gave the people their orders. He commanded the armed men to march ahead of the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest that represented God's presence among his people. 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets would walk in front of the ark, blowing their horns, and all the people would march behind them. The instruction was clear. You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout. Just quiet obedience. Complete silence except for the sound of the trumpets and marching feet. No war cries, no taunts, no conversations early in the morning on the first day. They began. An armed guard led 7 priests blowing ram's horns, followed by other priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant. The rest of the Israelites followed. They marched around the city once and returned to camp. This continued as instructed by God. March around the city once and return to camp. On the 7th day, they rose at dawn. And instead of marching around just once, they marched around the city 7 times still, in silence except for the trumpets. On the 7th time around, Joshua gave the command, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And the people shouted a great shout of faith and victory. The sound of their voices echoed through the air. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. Fell flat, meaning the walls fell outward in a way that created ramps of rubble, allowing the Israelites to charge straight up and into the city. Every man charged in and captured the city. God had given specific instructions about what to do after the victory. Everything in the city was to be destroyed, except for the silver, gold, bronze, and iron, which would go into the Lord's treasury. They were not to take any for themselves. Joshua made an exception for one family, a woman named Rahab and her family. Rahab had hidden and protected the Israelite spies when they came to scout out Jericho. Joshua commanded his men to bring Rahab and her entire family out safely before they destroyed the city. Joshua made this solemn declaration, "Cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. Victory comes from obedience, not from our own strength or wisdom. God's instructions often test our faith. So many of us give up on God's instructions when we don't see instant results. It seems like we aren't accomplishing anything. Keep trusting, keep marching, keep believing in your faith in God. The battle belongs to the Lord. The victory was already decided in heaven. It needs to be manifested on earth. When we face our own Jerichos, those impossible situations, those massive obstacles, those overwhelming challenges, we need to remember that if God has called us to face them, He's already determined the outcome. Sin had built a barrier between us and our Creator, but Jesus, through His death and resurrection, has broken down that wall, the walls that separated us from God. Sometimes His methods don't make sense. Sometimes what He asks seem ineffective or silly. Will we trust and obey God even when His instructions don't make sense? If you're facing an impossible situation right now, maybe the walls look too high, the enemy too strong, the odds too great. Keep marching, keep trusting, keep shouting with faith, because the walls are already coming down. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.